And so this is an example of using a structural definition. So here we have, once again, this is the object that represents me. My name's Chris, my age is 30, my spouse is Nikki. But then we also provide a structure so that there is a framework for any modifications that are going to happen to this object. And the structure defines that the age is a type number, the name is a type string, and on top of that, we can also say that the spouse is a type of ID person. And so actually this is kind of like a circular, a recursive definition. This right here is my definition for what a person object should look like. And what I'm saying is the spouse should also be a person object. And so, which you can do the same type of things, with classes or whatever. You can have your own class in a class. It also provides definitions for how to use, how to make these modifications and how to do lazy loading and all these things over HTTP, and defines things like how to define access levels, security, array modifications, using timestamps for doing optimistic object locking, client-side object creation, and the whole issues around IDs being created in multiple locations. So anyway, now I'm going to switch, and the rest of the talk, okay, this is going well, this is good timing, I think. The rest of the talk is going to be more on these tools that we can use to work with these different formats. Do you guys have any questions about this stuff first? So I kind of blew through it,
The only question that I still have in my mind is when you're trying to do JSON RPC, what the other end looks like.
Okay.
I mean, I think we understand that it's probably JavaScript running in a browser, but what does the other end look like? Is it a servlet? Is it CGI scripts or something on the other end? And maybe these tools will address that question.
Well, actually, these tools, I'm not going to get a whole lot into just the JSON RPC library. Actually, I should probably do a little bit more research in exactly how there is some Java JSON RPC libraries out there, and I can do some research on exactly what those look like as far as the code goes. JSON RPC itself doesn't make any definitions about exactly how it should be used over HTTP. Typically you might have like a servlet that handles the JSON RPC calls, and then the servlet will look at the method and then do logic branching based upon the method name.
Right.
So,
We haven't talked about the persistence part yet, have we?
No.
No, okay.
Not really. We just kind of briefly talked about how we can use object IDs
Yeah,
and have some coherency as far as lazy loading and object modification, which is kind of foundational to.
You didn't get all that good?
No, I was like, did I miss it? No, I understand.
Because that's what you're excited about, right?
Yeah, I was like, what?
Okay, cool. Well, I'll just try to skim through this stuff then and just get to persistence. Because that's actually what I'm most interested in too.
Okay.
So, and hopefully other people are too, because I think that's a key. I think persistence is huge. Hibernate's huge. I think Ruby on Rails, one of the big reasons it's so popular is because of Active Record, which is their persistent object mapping framework. It just made database things so simple. Like some of their demos are just based a lot around how, you make these database changes, but then you can do these things just with regular objects just instantaneously because it's all persistent in object map. So I think it's important, and I think it's going to be important in JavaScript. It has a lot of potential to be huge in JavaScript. And I think there's even more gains that you can get out of JavaScript because you're actually, by automating object mapping in JavaScript, you're actually dealing with even more issues because you're dealing with the requests and responses of AJAX as well as the whole issue of dealing with the persistent storage and doing the mapping and all that stuff. So I think it's even bigger than in my opinion, but that's yet to be seen. So CrossSafe is a tool I built for using the script tag approach where you're accessing cross-domain data, but you want to access it securely. And so basically what CrossSafe does is it uses the script tag approach with JSONP where we do a script tag and provide a callback, but it does it all in this iframe. And the iframe does this domain changing trick that allows it to sandbox these script tags. So these script tags don't have access to all my JavaScript environment in my parent JavaScript environment. And so it allows me to sandbox it. And so all the script is able to do is just call this callback, provide JSON data, and that's all it can really do. It's sandboxed as far as doing anything else. And so it allows us to securely access cross-domain data. And it uses an approach called subspace. And then also for the API, it uses the JSON request specification. And for those who don't know, JSON request is an API that Douglas Crockford proposed to add to browsers. It's an additional feature to browsers. And none of the browsers have implemented it yet. There is, just a few weeks ago, there was an extension for Firefox released that implements JSON request for Firefox. So, maybe it's gaining traction. Maybe we'll see it in browsers one day. Cross-save will always check for a JSON request object, and if it's available, it just defers to the native implementation. So it's kind of forward compatible. And so, I mean, basically the way it works is you call JSON request.get, you provide a URL and a callback, and request the JSON data, and you get it back in this value object. So it's really easy to use. There are limitations of it. There's certain things you have to do with how your DNS is set up and stuff. So it has its limitations. The native implementation would clearly be superior, but it does provide a way to do something.
Do they have similar things in like ActionScript libraries?
Yeah. Actually, that's another approach for doing that I didn't mention. That's another approach for doing cross-domain requests. Is Flash actually does support doing cross-domain requests, and they actually have their own schema about how this works, where you have to put a
cross-domain XML.
cross-domain.xml. Yeah. So. And that actually is another way to do it, but it's just a little bit clunkier because you have to load a Flash object and then your JavaScript has to interface with it. And if the server doesn't have the cross-domain XML, so. But that is definitely another viable approach. There's another approach called fragment identifier messaging, and it's really tricky where you have iframes and they just change their fragment identifier and it allows them to communicate with each other. That takes an even higher level of kind of server cooperation, but. I think there's actually another talk at this Ajax World that I think they're going to talk about fragment identifier messaging. Okay, so now I'm going to do. Oh, you know what? Oh, I can do this locally. I was just thinking. So I have an object browser, and this object browser basically can work with any JSON source and allow you to browse it like an Explorer, make modifications to it, and do all these things. So it's kind of like a front end. It's kind of like how you have like an SQL tool for your SQL database. Well, this is a front end for any JSON source, and that's kind of cool because JSON, can just go over the web, and so I could connect remotely to one of my web servers and use this. Let me pull it up here. Okay, and so. So this is just an object graph. It's kind of like drilling down through an object graph in like your debugger, right? Mm-hmm. And you could actually, I could do this. I could pull up Firebug, and it would look almost the same. Obviously Firebug interface is a little bit different than mine. They use different icons and stuff, but it's mapped to objects. So I can pull this up in Firebug, and it'll look basically the same. And so, just a few little things you can do. You can have different types. You can have numbers, you can have strings, you can have other objects, arrays, booleans, dates. You can have, here's an example of circular referencing. So this is John Doe object, and his wife is Jane Doe, and her husband is John Doe, and his wife is Jane. So I can go on and on because it's a circular reference. So it allows me to connect to any source, and I can make modifications to this, and I can save it, and it's all just using the regular JSON protocol. And so anyone who implements it, I could use this object browser to connect to it.